Thomas Jefferson's Declaration of Independence was written, of course, by Thomas Jefferson, but the fair copy that he sent to the Congress was substantially altered, even though the gist of the document remains the same. One prominent change was excision of a very large passage on the evils of slavery. So here on this 4th of July, I'd like to read for you Jefferson's original draft, the draft of his declaration, the fair copy that he sends to the Continental Congress before the Congress gets its mitts on it and makes some alterations. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and they are endowed by their Creator with inherent and inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations begun at a distinguished period in pursuing invariably the same object evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to expunge their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Britain is a history of unremitting injuries and usurpations, among which appears no solitary fact that contradicts the uniform tenor of the rest, but all have in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world for the truth of which we pledge a faith yet unsullied by falsehood. He, George III, has refused to assent to laws the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance unless suspended by their operation till his assent should be obtained. And when so suspended, he has utterly neglected to attend to them. He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people, unless these people would relinquish the right of representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only. He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records, for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly and continually for opposing with manly firmness his invasions on the rights of people. He has refused for a long time after such dissolutions to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative powers, incapable of annihilation, have returned to the people at large for their exercise, the state remaining in the meantime exposed to all the dangers of invasion from without and convulsions within. He has endeavored to prevent the population of these states, for that purpose obstructing the laws of naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migrations hither, and raising the conditions of new appropriation of lands. He has suffered the administration of justice totally to cease in some of these states, refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers. He has made our judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices and the amount in payment of their salaries. He has erected a multitude of new offices by a self-assumed power and sent hither swarms of new officers to harass our people and eat out their subsistence. He has kept among us in times of peace standing armies and ships of war without the consent of our legislators. He has affected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power. He has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our constitutions and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent for their acts of pretended legislation, for quartering large bodies of armed troops among us, for protecting them by a mock trial from punishment for any murders which they should commit on the inhabitants of these states, for cutting off our trade with all parts of the world, for imposing taxes on us without our consent, for depriving us of the benefits of trial by jury, for transporting us beyond the seas to be tried for pretended offenses, for abolishing the free system of English laws in a neighboring province, establishing therein an arbitrary government and enlarging its boundaries so as to render it at once an example and fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule in these states, for taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of our governments, for suspending our own legislatures and declaring themselves invested with power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever. He, George III again, has abdicated government, here withdrawing his governors and declaring us out of his allegiance and protection. He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burnt our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. He is at this time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny already begun with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy unworthy the head of a civilized nation. He has constrained our fellow citizens taken captive on the high seas to bear arms against their country, to become the executioners of their friends and brethren, or to fail themselves by their hands. He has excited domestic insurrection among us and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers the merciless Indian savages whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions of existence. He has incited treasonable insurrections on our fellow citizens with the allurements of forfeiture and confiscation of property. And finally, he has waged cruel war against human nature itself, violating its most sacred rights of life and liberty in the persons of a distant people who have never offended him, captivating and carrying them into slavery in another hemisphere, or to incur miserable death in their transportation thither. This piratical warfare, this opprobrium of infidel powers, is the warfare of the Christian king of Great Britain, determined to keep open a market where men should be bought and sold. He has prostituted his negative, for suppressing every legislative attempt to prohibit or to restrain this execrable commerce, and that this assemblage of whores might want no fact of distinguished eye, he is now exciting those very people to rise in arms among us and to purchase that liberty of which he has deprived them by murdering the people on whom he has also obtruded them, thus paying off former crimes committed against the liberties of one people with crimes which he urges them to commit against the lives of another. In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injuries. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a people who mean to be free. Future ages will scarcely believe that the hardiness of one man adventured within the short compass of 12 years only to lay a foundation so broad and so undistinguished for tyranny over a people fostered and fixed in principles of freedom. Nor have we been wanting in attentions to our British brethren We have warned them from time to time of attempts by the legislator to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over these states. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our immigration and settlement here, no one of which could warrant so strange a pretension, and that these were effected at the expense of our own blood and treason and treasure, unassisted by the wealth or the strength of Great Britain. That in constituting indeed our several forms of government, we had adopted one common king, thereby laying a foundation for perpetual league and amity with them. But that substitution to their parliament was no part of our constitution or ever an idea, if history may be credited, and we appealed to their native justice and magnanimity, as well as the ties of our common kindred, to disavow these usurpations, which were likely to interrupt our connection and correspondence. They too have been deaf to the voice of justice and of consanguinity, and when occasions have been given them by the regular course of their laws of removing from their councils the disturbers of our harmony, they have, by their free election, reestablished them in power. At this very time, too, they are permitting their chief magistrate to send over not only soldiers of our common blood, but Scotch and foreign mercenaries to invade and destroy us. These facts have given the last stab to agonizing affection, and manly spirit bids us to renounce forever these unfeeling brethren. We must endeavor to forget our former love for them and hold them as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies of war, in peace, friends. We might have been a free and a great people together, but a communication of grandeur and a freedom, it seems, is below their dignity. Be it so, since they will have it. The road to happiness and glory is open to us too. We will tread it apart from them and acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our eternal separation. We therefore, the representatives of the United States of America and General Congress assembled, do in the name and by authority of the good people of these states reject and renounce all allegiance and subjections to the kings of Great Britain and all others who may hereafter claim by, through, or under them. We utterly dissolve all political connections which may heretofore have subsisted between us and the people of Parliament of Great Britain. And finally, we do assert and declare these colonies to be free and independent states, and as free and independent states, they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract allies, establish commerce, and do all other acts and things which independent states may have right to do. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. I hope you have enjoyed this. This is something a little different. People commonly read or listen to the polished draft of the Declaration of Independence. This is Jefferson's fair copy, the copy that goes to the Continental Congress before certain alterations are made. So happy 4th of July and happy birthday to our beloved country. Stay well.